So today we're talking about how to invest for a financial future. So I would think that it's part of the process because part of the Mesila process is, and I'm just going to write that down over here. What part of the process does this what part of the process does this help or for a coach? Okay, that's a really good point. So we'll start with that. Aaron, are you here?
Yeah.
Where's Aaron? You have to wait for. Okay, so what I think Moish Greenfield is going to do is he's going to mute the other participants. But we have a wide variety. People are still joining. We're just going to get started. We have a wide variety of people who are joining. Some of them are people with money who want to learn how to invest. Okay. Some of them have no money, and they want to know if in this hour or 45 minutes, 35 minutes to an hour, depending on how the flow goes, they're going to learn how to get rich quick. So that's really good. And if you can tell me, you're laughing at me already. This is going to go well. Can I learn in an hour how to get rich? Does it take an hour? No.
You can learn in an hour how not to get poor.
How not to get poor. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. How not to get poor. That's really great. And so we have quite a few questions that came in, and there's a diverse crowd. When we have a diverse crowd, what we're going to want to do is to stick to the main theme. We have kind of like we spoke about before, is we have this shidra, so to speak, of the lulav. It's how to invest for a secure financial future. That assumes for the moment that people want to have a secure financial future. But let's take a step back. And I want to ask you something. In your bio, it said you have 20 years of experience, helping people manage their investments accounts in the United States and across the globe. I'm sure you've gained a lot from those 20 years, and you've gained a lot from working with the Mesila organization from our conversation. What can you tell us about investing that will help the average couple, the frum couple or non-religious, right? Couple gets married, they start to have kids, they develop, their budgets grow, and part of Mesila, as we spoke about, is obviously learning how to budget. Now, budgets differ on different people, but then along comes a part called investing. How does investing fit into the Mesila picture?
I think that's a really good question. So oftentimes people, and I've been with them, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. You said I've been 20 years, more than 20 years in the investment business. I'm licensed in Israel, I'm licensed in the United States. I'm also on the board of Mesila, but I'm like a success story of Mesila, right? I started as a coach, and been a coach for many years working with families. And what I think is important is oftentimes people get stuck sort of at the beginning process with Mesila, which is get out of debt and balance my budget. Okay, which is, that's the ikar, right? That's the most important thing, right? Without that, you drown. But after you get to that point, the question is what do I do? And that's where investing really comes in. It's the next part, right? Once you've gotten yourself stable financially, it's to create a secure future financially. And the only way really to do that is by investing over the long term, right? You started already, you jokingly about getting rich quick. I can already tell you, and I'm sure we're gonna get questions about that, and you're right, the number one principle with investing, if it sounds too good to be true, don't do it, right? There is no such thing as getting rich quick. And anybody who ever presents any kind of plan or investment idea or anything like that, run away, because it doesn't work that way. Just like there's no magical way to get yourself out of debt and to balance your budget, right? It's the same. It's hard work. You've got to roll up your sleeves and do it day in and do it day out. The same thing with investing, right? You've got to save money continuously, monthly, annually, whatever it is, and then invest it. And then over the long term, magically, you start really growing your assets and creating that sort of secure future that we all want and that we all need, because we all have, all kinds of goals outside of even retirement, which is a big goal, but marrying off our children and what have you. And if you don't invest, now, if you don't delay, right, if you don't procrastinate, your chances for success are much higher.
Okay, great. So we got a question in, and I want to address this in the beginning because this really dovetails a little bit with what you're saying. And the question goes as follows. And we're going to address the other questions that came in, and please send in your questions as well on the chat. If someone has just a little to invest, is he better off doing a life insurance policy that can be as a future college fund or a wedding fund for our kids later on, or any other investments out there? That was the question that came in. And before we get into the nitty gritty of answering this specific question, I think that's symptomatic, emblematic, so to speak, of what people are really looking for, because people are getting by. Before we answer the question, right, let's just take a step back and try to understand where this question is coming from. So if we can think about the questioner for a second, and this may be of the 100 or so people or plus people who are watching us today. Thank you for joining us. Person comes in, he has a little bit of money. He's done the savings. He's done the budgeting. He's looking for the next step. Okay. What should his next step be? So he's saving a little bit of money, right? He's $0 at the end of the month. You know, he's 0, and he's saving $100, $200 a month. Let's make it practical. Okay. What should this couple's first step be? It's a good question.
That's a great question. And it's a great question because I'll tell you, there's two things behind that question. One, there's a certain fear factor that I get a lot, and I've written a lot about this. And there's people who think that unless they have, $100,000 or $80,000 or $250,000, they can't start investing. And they wait and they spin their wheels and they never get to that point. And it's unfortunate because they could have really, really been growing a big nest egg. The other issue is, and this I see all the time, is where you get a chassan and a kala, you have a wedding, and the couple, they get married, they get wedding gifts, they have, tens of thousands of dollars, 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is, and they don't do anything with it. They leave it in the bank, earning 0 interest, and 3 years, 4 years, and they don't know, maybe they're going to buy a house, an apartment, maybe they're not, but in the meantime, they're learning in Kollel, they're not learning in Kollel, whatever it is, right? And that money is just sort of sitting there when it could be working for them. So the most important thing, even for the guy with $100, is to start investing. Right? The sooner you start investing, the better off you're going to be in the future. Right? That's like empirically correct. Don't wait and never be too intimidated to think, well, I don't have enough to start, because there are all kinds of ways that one can start investing even with $100 a month. That's number one. Okay. Number two is, before you start investing, the first thing that you should do is understand what your goals are and what your needs are. Okay, you should sit down and say, okay, this is money that I need for the next 2 or 3 years because I'm gonna buy a property, I'm buying an apartment to live, or this is something I want. I've got 15 years until I start marrying off my children, or I'm gonna be investing for retirement, or most probably a combination of all of those things. And once then you know what the money is for, then you can start investing it, right? The point of the money is to serve whatever your goals are. It's not just to hoard as much as possible. There used to be a joke, a bumper sticker, right? Whoever dies with the most money wins. Okay, maybe that's cute, maybe it's not cute, but it's not really relevant.
It's not true. It's not true. All right.
It's not true. The money's there to serve a purpose or purposes.
Right.
So you've got to first define what those purposes are. If you don't know what those purposes are, you don't know how to gear the money. But once you know what it is that you want to try to accomplish, and keep in mind that might be a moving goal, right? As you go through life, those goals are going to continually change. But once you know what you want to do, then you can start investing the money.
Okay. So you go ahead.
No. So then practically, right? Whether it's an insurance or whether I'm not so qualified to speak in insurance, I'm not licensed in insurance. I'm licensed in terms of stocks and bonds and mutual funds, those financial investments. But there are ways to start. And for a coach then should encourage their clients, students, whatever it is, to also start immediately saving. If anybody wants more information, they can contact me. There's plenty of information available online, how to begin investing, whether it's using ETFs, which are exchange traded funds, things which are simple. Right? Don't get Rule number 2, right? We talked about don't try and get rich quick. Number 2, keep it simple. Don't get, into these convoluted deals where you're partners with 4 other people and one of them is your father-in-law and one of them is your brother-in-law. And, keep it simple. There are very, very simple ways in my business, right? Which are, index funds, exchange traded funds, things which mimic the stock market, which over the long term will provide nice, solid returns over the long term that you can start with very, very little money. I mean, $100 you can start with, and you can do it every month and automate that, or you've got $100 going in every month, and before you know it, at the end of the year, you've got over $1,000, and then it starts compounding. That's the way to grow wealth.
Right. So it's really fantastic. One thing I want to highlight is part of the Mesila process is a healthy financial life, which means that a person actualizes their goals, whatever they are, and views that as part of their financial goals we're talking about here, and views that as part of their financial future. So one of the issues that I had with couples, number one, and this is an interesting thing that you're bringing up, a couple gets married, okay? They have some kids. They start to go into debt, and they have their money that they had set aside, right? So in their savings funds, in their mutual funds, and they're in debt. What do you suggest to this couple? Should they liquidate their fund? Should they work on their budget? And again, it is important, and I just want to stress this for myself. I know this is an interview. I believe that it's important for people, even if they are working on the bottom of their budget, they're working on, really working out those conflicts of money, working out what's appropriate to spend, to have an idea that we want to get somewhere, right? Like we don't want, it's not exciting just to be zero. We want to be able to afford things. So what would you say to people who are either getting more into debt, but they have investments on the side?
So I think that if you were to that's a really good question. I think if you were to Google search the answer to that, you'll probably get 50% who say one thing and 50% who say another thing. What I tell people, when I used to tell people all the time, when I work, and I still do work with individuals in debt, is before you go and start liquidating your investments, you better have your monthly budget down, okay? Because if you don't have a budget, and then you take your investments and you blow through those, at the end of the day, you're going to be in a year from now, you're going to be in debt and you're not going to have any investments, right? So you basically struck out, as opposed to, growing your debt a little bit and keeping your investments. Ultimately, I think the best situation, right, would be to, if they can at least get themselves even on a monthly basis, and then if they have to sort of, the short term, dip a little bit into the investments, then do so. But with the goal, obviously, of replenishing that. And it goes without saying, again, back to the coaches, I think this is very important. When you're creating a budget, ultimately, right, once you get even at least, and you've gotten out of debt, is to add a line in that budget, which is pay yourself first, basically, right? The first payment on the monthly basis goes to you, and it goes into your savings, and it goes into your investments. That's where you ultimately want to be. Right? And if that could be $50 a month, that could be $1,000 a month, it could be a lot more than that, right? But it's really, really important ultimately, because we talk about saving, but where's that going to come from, right? It's got to come from somewhere. And if you put it into your budget, just like, your mortgage and your food and your cell phone and all these different things, if that's a line item, and that's a line item that's high up, it's prioritized, then you're going to meet that goal, and you're going to start funding your savings every single month.
Wow, fantastic. So we're talking here about how to invest for a secure future. And the word secure is very, very important. We mentioned a few goals. A person, they get married, learning in Kollel, eventually will buy a house in a few years. That's on the horizon. They have like a 15-year plan, marrying off kids. Sometimes that happens, right? Or a 30-year plan of retiring. So I'm just giving you those numbers, 2, 15, and 30. People want to come away. I know that we can't really discuss details specifically, but I want to speak about sectors, because this is a lot of misinformation. A person who's investing for 2 years should not be investing in the same type of investments as someone who's investing for 30 years. And this is something I think, and we talk about security, is very important. So I want to ask you, as they say in Israel, bigadol, okay, big picture. I want to give you three numbers: 2, 15, and 30. What should someone who's looking at a 2-year investment plan go, a 15-year investment plan or a 30-year investment plan?
Okay. Let's start with the 2-year. Here in Israel, probably the most common question I get from people calling in is that, I have X amount of money and I need it for the short term because I'm planning on buying an apartment within the next X amount of time. So my first question always is, well, what's that X amount of time? This exactly relates to your question, because I would say, and this is not particularly good news, right? But especially when we're living in a world where you can't really make anything in the bank in deposits, but anything under 3 years, especially if you're using that to buy a house, to buy an apartment, you're counting on that money for your down payment, right? So you can't really afford at all to take any risk, right? If you lose 20% of that, that's going to impact you a lot more than if you make 10 or 15%. So because you can't afford to lose that money because it's for 2 years and you're buying a property with it, you've got to leave that. I mean, it's got to be as safe as possible, which means in a CD, if we're talking about America, in a deposit in the bank. Basically now, you're saying, I'm not going to make anything on that money, but it's more, for me, I'm willing to forego making anything on that money because I need that money as safe as possibly can be. Because I need that money in the short term. 2 years is a very short amount of time in this business and any kind of investment. And as such, it's got to be, 100% secure. That's my shita. Once you go out to 15 years already, now you're talking, right? Now you can take upon yourself a lot more risk. Again, risk doesn't mean that you're gambling. Risk doesn't mean that it's the Wild West, that you're just sort of flinging darts at at the trendiest thing which is out there and hope that it hits, right? You have to be strategic and you have to be smart. But if you track, again, it's difficult because there are close to 100 people on this call and everybody has their own individual nuances.
Yeah, sure.
But they got dull, right? Just in general, in my business, again, we're talking stocks and bonds. If you just link yourself to the broader stock market, which averages over time, depending on whatever data you take, between 9 and 11% over the long term per annum. That doesn't mean every year getting 9%, right? It means over a 5, 10, 15-year period, your average return looking back will be that 9 to 11%. You're going to do just fine. I think if all the people on this call right now, sort of knew that over the next couple of decades, they would have a return which is near double digits, they'd be pretty thrilled, right? And what I would also say is once you get into the long term, yeah, there's short-term up and down. There's short-term volatility, right? Like this year is a great example. We had Corona hit, and everything went right down into the gutter. The market lost, a third of its value, and then 6 months later, it made it up. That's very extreme on both ends, but there's a lesson in there, and the lesson is when you're investing for the long term, what happens over 5, 6, 7 months is really, really irrelevant.
Right.
And nobody even remembers what happened in 2008 and when the stock market crashed. They don't remember what happened in 2000 when the high-tech bubble burst. These are all sort of historical blips on a much longer chart where over time, again, statistically, you're going to make lots and lots of money. You'll do very well for yourself.
Right. And I just want to add something that you pointed out, something about the stock market, the recent dip, and just kind of pull it together with something that you said earlier, which is that we experienced a dip. You just said that we lost 1/3 of its value. So if you said $90,000 in the stock market, value of $90,000 went down to $60,000, right? Now, we're getting a lot of questions in, thank God, about buying a house. And you just mentioned that someone who's investing for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, like you said, they get married, they want to buy a house or an apartment, they're going to invest in strategic, in secure. Now, just imagine if someone was planning on buying a house, okay, in April of 2020, okay, and they're like, oh, we're going to buy a house, and we have all our money, we have a lot of our money in the stock market, okay, and then what happens to the stock market? Well, they didn't have $90,000 anymore, they have $60,000 anymore. They have $60,000. So you're right on the one hand that by investing in the stock market, it will have its ups and downs. However, one should be very, very careful about investing in the stock market while saving for a home.
And I would take that a step further. I would say that's a good example, but it can be anything. We mentioned your goals earlier, right? The first thing you have to do is set up your goals. It could be that you're doing great and everything's doing well and you're making money in the market over time. And you've got a kid who you think in the next couple of years is going to go into shidduchim. Or you're 62 and you think in the next couple of years you're going to retire. It's all the same thing, right? Or you're going to buy a house, right? Ultimately, you're getting to your goal. And as you get to your goal, the first thing you need to do is reassess. Well, do I have enough money? Where am I vis-a-vis my goal? And if it's, if I've got plenty of more money, well, then I can take some money off the table maybe and make that secure for the next year or two until I marry off my kid, until I retire, or whatever it is, until I buy my house. And the rest of the money that I can save for even longer down the road, let that money run, keep that more, growth oriented. So you're always sort of trying, the goal here is always to try and keep the money and the goals aligned. And every time you start getting close to one of those goals, wherever it is through the milestones in life, you have to reassess, because you might have to take your foot off of the accelerator at some point. Because you can't, especially at retirement, if you don't have a huge nest egg, but you have a modest amount, you can't, like you said, right? If the market drops again 30% and you're 70 years old or 72 years old, right? And you have no more inheritances coming to you and you're not going to go back to work, right? It is what it is. Whatever you've managed to save, that's what it is, right? So
it is what it is.
It is what it is, right?
It is what it is.
To do you any favors and bail you out. So you've got to really measure what your goals are, how much money you need, right? Your income and your expenses, all sort of comes back full circle, right? To the whole budgeting and Mesila, right? This is going round and around and around, but through life. And if you do that, you're really going to be in good shape. But again, you have to reassess and make sure, you can't afford, if you're 75 years old, 80 years old, and that's what you've got a couple $100,000 to help supplement your Social Security or whatever it is, you can't put all your money into Tesla stock or the next, Chinese internet stock. You've got to be smart and measured about what kind of risk you're going to take. Right.
And it was really nice that you brought it together. Just a little promo for Mesila. We are a non-for-profit organization, and our leader Shmuley Margolis works tirelessly to support our organization. And I would like to say that it is a worthwhile organization to donate to. This is obviously a webinar free of charge, and we hope to make other webinars free of charge for everybody. For those who are interested in the financial future of Klal Yisrael, we know that Mesila is really on the forefront of that. And I do want to, Moshe Greenfield is going to send a link to donate hopefully soon. I do tech, not content. That's Moshe. So I want to speak a little bit about what you said about the life goals for Mesila, because people think a lot of times that going through the numbers and seeing how everything adds up and their needs in the month and short-term and long-term is really a goal for when people are struggling. And from what I hear you're saying now is that that's really a life skill. This is something for the coaches also to teach their clients, is what we're doing now. You called Mesila because you had a problem. Or you called Mesila because you wanted to do better, right? But we're actually teaching you a life skill that when you have a lot of money, you're going to need as well. And I think that's something that you repeat. I want to switch gears a little bit. And we have some questions, but before that, we're kind of halfway through the program. So you mentioned that people call up and they say they have money. You don't have to answer this if I'm going to make you uncomfortable, right? That's okay. People like interesting interviews. It's sticking to the theme. Don't worry about it. How much money what's the most amount of money you've seen people make? Most amount of money you've seen a person make either with you, just step by step, putting things together, one step in front of another. Give me something inspirational that I could take out. What have you seen?
So a lot of times I've had clients who've made tens of millions of dollars, but that's not, I don't know how relevant necessarily that is, but I've been in the business for a few decades, right? So that might not be as impressive as it sounds, because again, we're talking about the long term and things work over the long term. What I
You've
think
seen
is
people
really,
who started, I'm sorry, you've seen people who started out like,
they started with a lot of money, but they made even more money, right? They made lots and lots of money. But I want to talk
okay,
about something else, because a lot of times in this business, I think this is what you're sort of getting at, right? It's easy to talk high and to say, yeah, if you do X, Y, and Z, everything works out, and you'll be wealthy. And then, the person who's talking like me, you'll never find him again. And then, what do you do in 10 years? Like, oh, it didn't work out or whatever. So for me, like, inspiration is going back over every now and then. I do this. I review with clients. I have all their statements and everything's online. And, people who've been with me for 15 years, 17 years. And we say, you started, I think it's even more inspirational where somebody started with $110,000, and then 18 years later, they're buying an apartment for their kid or whatever it is, and they're liquidating their account, and they're at, they have $290,000 or whatever it is. And I said, wow, this really works. It's even like chizuk for me. I'll be honest with you, right? Because you talk and I write and all this kind of stuff, but when you really see it tachlis, when you see it really in action, working, it really works, right? And it's just like it could be in real estate. It can be pretty much anything that's basic that you're investing in. If you hold good assets for the long time, they tend to appreciate. Over the short term, things go up and things go down, but just real estate, stocks, over the long term, it's a great way to make money. Now, I had a lady who was, Elena went she was in a bad situation, a very bad marriage. She managed to get out. She knew nothing about money. She had very little self-confidence. She didn't have anything. And I worked with her over time. We went very, very slow and very, very conservative. And there's somebody at the end of the day who now in retirement has enough money that, along with a little bit of Social Security she gets an Israeli Bituach Leumi from her investments, she's able to generate enough money to live on and live comfortably. And that's real success.
right.
That's real success. If somebody picks the right stock and makes millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's great. Okay. But I think real success is for somebody who really follows the plan and does it over the long term. And it works. I mean, I have great stories like that, but I've got also stories people who became convoluted. I think when we were talking about this last week, when I would sit with families, Mesila families, I told you there were times I would come out and I'd have to pop a couple of Advils because I had such a headache just trying to figure out what was going on. There was a guy, they're learning in Kollel and they bought an apartment, they're learning in Yerushalayim. They bought an apartment in Haifa up in the north, and they have partners with their father-in-law and their brother-in-law. I sort of hinted to this earlier, right? And this one owns a sixth, and this one owns a third, and this one, and then they took more. One of them borrowed money, and the other one has to pay him. You know what? I can tell you right now, that's not going to work. One way or another, that's not going to work. And somebody I saw in the chat, they were talking about Mint.com, and somebody talked about Dave Ramsey's Every Dollar. Those are both good apps for people to track their stuff on. But if you're talking about Dave Ramsey, so Dave Ramsey always says, when you're talking about going into business or borrowing money from family, right? He says on Thanksgiving dinner, the turkey on Thanksgiving always tastes better if you don't owe your mother-in-law money. Okay? There's something to that, right? Going into this convoluted business with your family is a bad thing. So, but if you keep it's like everything in life. If you follow the rules, if you just do what you're supposed to do, just like the Mesila playbook, right? To get out of debt and balance your budget. If you extend that and follow those rules to investing and for the long term, the same thing's going to happen. Good things happen. If you try and do shortcuts and, try and hit grand slams and try and get rich quick, and fall for scams and things which are just not reasonable, that's where people get tripped up all the time. And I can tell you something, this community, sort of the Mesila community, unfortunately, I think here at least, guys learning in Kollel, from my experience, are a little more susceptible to getting conned than the general public, let's say, because they're so sort of desperate to get a little bit more money and get a little bit more return, that if somebody promises them 12% when you can get exactly 0% in the bank, or maybe 0.25% in the bank, you know, they're going to jump all over that. But we all know that, or most of us know, right, that ultimately there's probably something there which is not so kosher. And I've seen it over and over and over again. Unfortunately, Yerushalayim is like a magnet for these types of scams, if I can use, I mean, it is, they're scams, I'll use the word. And they prey on people who need it the most. And it's very sad, and people get taken, and they get taken all the time.
Right, right.
All the time.
Right. So there are two, I think you're pointing to two distinct reasons why the scams are happening. Number one, well, I could say three reasons. There are three reasons. Number one, there's a high level of trust. There's a high level of trust. Like, oh, I trust you. You're on the web. You're a nice guy, right? And people trust each other. And there are pros and cons to that. If it helps you, it's good. If they swindle your money, then it's a con. Number two is the need for the money. Is that people need, the stakes are really high. People want to buy apartments, and they want to have extra income, and they think of income generating investments, when a person who's of means wouldn't necessarily think of that right now, but even someone who doesn't have such a high income would be thinking of income generating investments. And number three would be the lack of financial knowledge, meaning, and I know that scams are going to happen, right? We had some people in New York who had Ponzi schemes, right? And they're not limited. They're not limited to people who don't have financial knowledge, because we know in New York there were a lot of other people who had scams, but they lack financial knowledge. And I think what you said is, if someone comes up to you with an investment, and tell me if I'm summarizing you correctly, and it seems too good to be true, first of all, walk away. Okay, that's number one. That's what you were saying. But number two, educate yourself. Take a step back. If a guy is pressuring you to close in a certain amount of time and you don't feel comfortable with it, then you know what? Take a step back, look into it, and then take the next step forward. I want to turn to another part. You did mention another question that I had, which was, what was the worst thing you've seen, like the most amount of money that somebody lost? You said, can you give me a number, the most amount of money you heard, you were familiar with, that someone lost in a scam?
In a scam?
Yeah, bad investment, stupid
idea. I don't know, probably approaching $1 million in my experience. There's different issues here. This is probably a topic within itself. The regulators in the states are very interested or worried, let's say, about seniors getting taken to the cleaners from scams. That's like the hottest topic right now, for retirees who are older to get scammed. That's a big topic in the States. In Israel, I was contacted by the Israeli regulators, the Israel Securities Authority, which is like the SEC in the States, and they wanted to know about any kind of scams that I knew about directed towards the Haredi public.
Wow.
So I guess wherever you are, but I'll give you an example of a scam that happened here. This was years ago. Somebody came to me, and he wanted to know, if he had a moderate type of portfolio, what he could, what kind of returns he could expect. So I said, I don't know, 7%, 7% approximately. And he said, 7%. He started laughing. He goes, I was just called that I could do a guaranteed deposit in a Georgian bank for 12%. Now, most of you watching think, oh, Georgian bank, that's cool. That's, the state of Georgia. No, we're talking about the country of Georgia, which is like next to Azerbaijan, okay? This is like one of the, I think, ranked one of the most corrupt countries in the world. But 12% is 12%. It's guaranteed, right? It's a bank, the Bank of Georgia, right? It's guaranteed. What could go wrong with a deposit in the Georgian bank in Tbilisi? Now, I was in Tbilisi a year ago. A lot can go wrong with your money in Tbilisi, let me tell you.
Wow.
So you just have to be smart. And like anything else in life, if you just don't know, you've got to ask. And if you're not comfortable with it, ask a friend, ask another professional. And, if it just sounds too good to be true, again, I've said it 3 times, stay away from it. It is too good to be true.
Wow. So we had changing gears. That's really enlightening, and I'm glad this was for Toelas. Changing gears a little bit. We had a couple questions about investing in Israel, and I'm just going to read them for you. This is how can people in Israel invest safely for the future? Is there any recommended place or method in Israel? That's question number one. Okay, and then the second question is, um, I would love it if you could address investment practices or important things to know for American expats living in Israel. So you're American and you're living in Israel, including, is it better to move money to the United States to invest or keep investments in Israeli shekel? So let's take question number one, and then we'll go to question number two. I'll do a little bit more explaining, and then we'll go to questions on the open forum. It was really great.
Say to go more. So the first question I'm going to answer, there's an issue. I'll give a little bit of what the second question here was asking is very, very important. I'll give a little bit of background. For Americans, expats who live in Israel, it has become very, very, or who live anywhere else in the world outside of the US, it's become very, very difficult to invest in the local domicile where they currently are. Because taxes become very, very prohibitive. I don't want to get into all of the acronyms of PFIX and FATCA. I don't want to get into the minutia, but it becomes very, very prohibitive tax-wise. Now, to answer the first question, assuming that you're not an American, there are plenty of viable ways to invest in Israel. Obviously, Jews have an inclination towards real estate. So real estate is a reasonable approach. Again, it's not what I do. And then there's the stock market, the Israeli stock market, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, which is very reasonable. You've got good companies, the top banks and the top food companies, the top insurance companies. You have a smattering of all of the Israeli high-tech companies, which everybody's so which is sort of powering the world right now, which everybody's really fired up about. Everybody wants a piece of sort of the Israel high-tech scene. You can have exposure through the Israeli Stock Exchange, Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, to that also. So there are plenty of ways to invest locally. Pretty much the same ways that are available to somebody living in America. You can do here. Just keep it local real estate, local stocks and bonds. Again, keep it simple. The question on the American expats, that's really sort of my cup of tea. That's what I do. I really work with American expats, Americans who have made Aliyah, who live here, and work with them with their money in the States. Because of what I mentioned, it's prohibitively, tax-wise, it's become prohibitively costly, let's say, for Americans who live in Israel to invest here. Again, if it's for the long term, I generally will recommend to people to move their money back to the States and to invest in the US. If it's money that they're going to need in the next couple of years for an apartment, I just tell them to, plug your nose, stick it in the bank, and don't make anything. Because, the transfers and the currency conversions, all those things become costly, and it's not worth it. You can't take any risks, going back to what we mentioned earlier. But my recommendation generally, 95% of the time, again, not knowing your individual situation, but generally is, if you want to invest for the long term and you're an American living in Israel, you're best off moving your money back to the States, opening up a brokerage account there, like what we do, and invest there.
Wow, fantastic. So we have a lot of questions coming on the chat about specific numbers, buying a car first, in cash, investing for a house. I just wanted to say that that Aaron is available. If they can email, people can email you directly in regards to investment. You're on the web, I assume?
And I'm on the web. You can email me, Aaron, Aaron, at Lighthouse with an L, Lighthouse Capital. That's one word, lighthouse.capital.co.il. You can check me out on the web at www.aaronkatsman.com. You can find me on YouTube. You can subscribe with all my videos, and I'm out there. You can Google search me and you'll find me.
Okay, great. And if people have specific questions for me, they could email me. My Mesila email address is eprero@mesilausa.org, eprero@mesilausa.org, and we will type the addresses. And if you contact the Mesila office, they're online. They could send you to me. as well, or any other coach. So I have another few questions here. There are quite a few coaches who are listening, or people who want to be coaches. What is your message to the coaches? What would you want to tell? Takeaway. Here we go. We're at the end of the program here. You have someone who signed up to be a coach or seeing couples. You're giving us hadracha. What is your hadracha to the coaches? What do you want them to know?
That it doesn't end with a balanced budget. In many respects, that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. And you've got to encourage, you need to encourage your clients, your families to take the next step. And that's to start investing. Again, $100 a month, $50 a month, you can do it. Just set something up. Again, that line item in the budget, right? Mortgage, pay yourself first, investing, saving, that's got to be up there. And they just tick it off, right? They won't even know it. $50, $100, $200, off it goes. And you can set it up automated, right? Because we know when you automate things, it makes life a lot easier. It's sort of out of sight, out of mind. And it keeps getting plowed in, and then the compounding works, and off you go. As opposed to keeping it manual, and then it's like, oh, well, this month I really need the $250. I've got to, Tishrei, I've got to buy a lulav and an esrog, and I've got to buy decorations for my sukkah, and standing room for my outside minyan for Kippur, for the seat that I don't really have. All those different things. So if you put it in your budget, just like you're paying for food, and just like you're paying for your utilities, you'll plow money into investments. And again, the coaches should encourage them, right? At the beginning, it's pretty natural for people to be a little apprehensive, especially people who are coming from, forget about investing, right? The opposite, coming from debt or from hardship. Hold their hands. That's what I do a lot, right? Just hold their hands and start. And it's not so scary. And there are ups and downs, but you weather that storm and off you go. And that's the real way, like we said, a balanced budget is great, but it only takes you so far. If you want to, buy things, again, not that that's the goal, but if you want to buy things, want to marry off your kids, if you want to help your grandchildren with their braces, whatever, or chugim in Israel so they can learn how to play the piano, whatever it is, it helps to have a little bit of money saved up.
Okay, great. And we're going to answer all these questions that are coming in. Maybe I'll stay online if you have time that you could answer them as well. I want to hear some chizuk for the clients. We have a lot of clients come in. They call up, they're really hesitant. By the time they start, they get worse and worse. What message can you give us for the clients?
To do it, right? Somebody just literally, I see that somebody asked, what percent of your income should be saving for near-term retirement? So the answer to that is, 10%, right? We have Meiser for tzedakah, and we have the same thing for savings. At a very minimum, right? And that's, I think, that was perfect timing on the question, because that's really the answer, right? Just to do it, right? And it's, what? It was working with clients for them to take the step, right? It was a joke in my office. People would come in and we never see them again, right? A lot of people came through the office who had one meeting, with me in terms of getting out of debt as a coach, as a family coach. And they couldn't, after that meeting, they couldn't take the plunge. They couldn't jump into it. It's very, very intimidating, right?
Right.
But for those who do, there's a big reward at the end. And this is the same thing when it comes to investing. Just jump in. Again, keep it simple. Doesn't have to be convoluted, doesn't have to be complicated, but just do it, right? You hear these stories of, people who got bar mitzvah gifts. I get people all the time that had shares of Coca-Cola, and they do this, and all of a sudden, their grandparents bought them share stocks for their bar mitzvah, and along the way here and there, and then all of a sudden they've got $50,000, right? They didn't even know what they were doing. They didn't know anything. Their grandparent bought. It's just by doing it, right? And you can be scared, but there's always somebody out there who will hold your hand, and then you'll get used to it and just do it. That's just the way to. Wow. That's the way to grow.
Okay,
and
I have a tough
question. Everybody can do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist. The rocket scientists are the ones who don't do so well. Just
Ah,
right. It's
you're right.
not so hard. It's really not so
Not so
hard.
hard. So I have a question that you can ask. I'm going to ask you, okay? So I'm like the Q&A. I'm going to get my question in first. Maybe you have an answer for me. When I work with couples in the Mesila, my particular, my my expertise, okay, is dealing with couples who have a lot of friction, okay? And a lot of times when they have friction, sometimes it's about money, sometimes it's about other things, but money plays a large role. Other times you have a couple who one wants to come in and get started, and the other one is just like, I don't want to hear about it. I'm just happy where I am. I personally, and I'm a big fan of yours, right? I like this idea of productivity and getting started. What do you do if you have one couple and it does, the husband and wife, you know, they go both ways on this. One couple wants to get started and says, just do it. And one says, I don't want to get started. I'm just way too scared. And we know the best thing is for them to be proactive. What's your advice to me? I get the first, I'm doing the interviews. So I get to ask the first question.
So what I would say, and I get that a lot. It's not, you know,
Oh,
I
good,
sit with
good. Not just
people and,
me.
you know, that's what marriage is all about, right? You know, if we agreed on everything, it wouldn't be as much fun as it is, right?
That's right.
So what you usually do is you find the middle ground. You do a pshara, like we do in a lot of different things, right? You start, you know, generally, and it's not only if one gets pulled in kicking and screaming, the other one's all gung-ho. Generally, there's been a lot of research. There's like gender-wise, there are differences in people's approaches to investments. Okay, men tend to be more aggressive, women tend to be more cautious, and that's sort of understandable. But there's been a lot of investing research done about that, and that's pretty much in many respects what you're saying, right? That's your question in certain respects. My answer is to start slow, right? So if you're really, you know, according to the textbook, or according to, you know, what you should be doing, quote unquote, you know, you should have X, you know, you should have X invested in the market, and Y, a much smaller number invested in safe investments. Maybe you want to flip it, right? Just so that, like, you know, when you go to the beach, right? You know, you go to the pool, you put your foot in, you don't just dive in, right? You want to first test the waters. The same thing here until you get comfortable. That's something that, you know, we do a lot of. It's part of the hand holding generally, right? People are nervous. Right. It doesn't make sense to just go jump into the deep end. You start measured, you know, you start off with very, very conservative types of investments. Then over time, they see it's not so bad. And you keep sort of explaining the benefits of growth over the long term. And you see how the portfolio sort of maneuvers from something very conservative at the beginning to something which is a lot more, you know, matim is the Hebrew word. I'm trying to search for the English word. Something a lot more relevant for what they're trying to accomplish.
Right, right. And I think that we can take that in terms of, that gives me a little bit of solace in terms of the people. Let's say you have one couple doesn't want to come in. You say, we're not going to speak about everything in the budget. We'll start slowly. We'll speak about the fixed expenses in the budget. Let's just talk about what are your fixed expenses every single month. We're not going to talk about the variables, something that you can handle, and then add on from there. Because we have a rule in the Gemara, tafasta meruba lo tafasta. If you grab for too much, then you don't end up with anything. And I think that goes as well with people's own individual pockets and in regards to investing in the future. So before we go to questions from everybody else, if you have time to stick around,
Sure.
I want to ask you something. We spoke about this last week. I knew I was going to put you on the spot. We're holding, this is a Jewish organization, or by Aleph Slichos, and we try to gain inspiration from all of our different surroundings, and whatever comes our way, we try to bring some spiritual inspiration for chizuk. And I would just ask you to share some words of chizuk, spirituality, depth, approaching Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that you could bring from your experience as 20 years as an investment advisor.
You know, I think that it's the last siman in Hilchos Yom Tov, I think. If you look in the Mishnah Berurah, the Shulchan Aruch Mishnah Berurah, right, where it talks about living within your means and living b'tzimtzum, and the Bir Halacha goes on there at length about what that means and the responsibilities. And we're approaching Rosh Hashanah, right? And he quotes the fact on Rosh Hashanah, We get our, we're written down for what our parnasa is going to be for the following year. And because of that, we have a certain responsibility to live within that, because we don't know what that's going to be, right? So as of the, the halacha is outside of Shabbos, outside of expenses for Yom Tov, you have to be b'tzimtzum. There's a flip side of that, right? We also know that it's not just about living in tzimtzum, but we also know that there's a Gemara that talks about actually investing, right? What are you supposed to do with your money, right? It's the Gemara, I think, is above a Basra in the, where is it, in the Pays, the Pay Gimel, somewhere around there, I think, which talks about shlish, right? That you invest your money a third. You have to diversify. And I think that's really fits. The fact of the matter is you sort of caught me off guard with the question, but no, it's not a problem. But it sort of fits. I'm just thinking out loud. It's sort of, that's the full circle of Mesila, right? That on the one hand, you have to live within your means. On the other hand, we don't just put our heads in the sand. We have to try and grow and invest our money and do something with our money. And, the more money you have, also, you can give tzedakah and you can help out other people. And it's not, it's not a bad thing, God forbid, to have money. And it's a bracha to have money if you do the right thing with the money, right? So, but you have to be responsible with your money, which means investing intelligently with your money, not, getting conned, not getting scammed, but being smart, diversifying, right? Real estate and business. And I would, tying to stocks and bonds, the Gemara, obviously the Gemara didn't have that back then, but I think that sort of fits the model pretty well. And if you do all those things, right, then we can be, written for a year of, hopefully this year, Tov Shin Pei Aleph will be a little bit better health-wise also than Tov Shin Pei. But Parnasa, right, the pay already, we're in the pays, right? The pay is for Parnasa. And, we cannot just live within our means, Kamoshet Tzarich, according to the halacha, but grow our money as well, according to that Gemara, and all the benefits, right? The benefits for ourselves, for our families, and for the greater community, which means more giving and more tzedakah as well.
Right. So it's about creating a healthy balance, is what I hear you saying. Just creating a healthy balance. And that's really important. So right now, we're going to go to questions, and you're free to read the questions on your own from your Zoom, all right? So pick the ones that you feel the most appropriate for this venue.
Okay. We spoke about budgeting apps for the iPhones. Mint is fine. Every dollar from Dave Ramsey is fine. If one has a substantial amount of cash and is nearing retirement, how can you invest it to generate a reliable source of income? That's a great question. I'm not going to punt on that, but that's a real specific type of answer, because you really need to know then what your income is, right? What are you looking at in terms of your retirement, right? Do you have a pension coming in? Do you have Social Security coming in, or Bituach Leumi in Israel, or a combination? What are all of do you have property which is spitting off money, right? You have to know exactly when you're in retirement what your incomes are going to be, right? And then try and figure what your expenses are going to be. And then you take your money, if there's a shortfall, and you invest it in income generating types of investments to sort of make up or to supplement the missing income. I'd be happy to speak to you about that in more detail, but that's sort of the theory. That's sort of how you want to do it. And that's really, really important. That's a great question. Did you hear me?
Yeah, everything. I was just scrolling out. So,
okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We spoke about, let me just keep going down. I'm going from the down. That was a good question. Is $10,000 a reasonable amount to start an investment? Sure. I see you can start with, that's a great amount. What returns can be expected for $10,000 for a long term, 10 to 15 years? Again, if you link yourself to the stock market, to the S&P 500 in the States, historically, right, there's no guarantees, but historically you're looking at anywhere between, let's say, an 8 to an 11% annual return. So, over 15 years, your $10,000 will turn into, again, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but you're looking at around $35,000 to $40,000 with compounded interest. It's a beautiful thing, compounding interest. Let's see. Whoop. Wait.
Don't worry about it. You can keep on going. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just got, hold on. What else do we have? We have, what proportion do you like to invest for long, short-term stocks for a young couple? Again, that's going to depend what they are investing for. We need to know what their goals are, right? If it's to buy an apartment and that's the money that you use for a down payment, then I would, as I said, I probably would, I would suggest, if it's the short term, nothing in stocks. For the long term, pretty much everything linked to the stock market, because you have so much time ahead of you to invest, and you should take advantage of the power of the stock market and the power of compounding interest. So that's a good question, and that would be the answer. I want to know if one is living in a community for at least 1.5 to 2 years, but after that is not sure if they will be moving or staying. Should they be looking to buy or rent? I would probably say you should look to rent. I think just like investing in stocks, 2 years, 1.5 years is not enough time because you have ups and downs. So too by real estate, right? Real estate is also cyclical, and you don't want to be in a situation. And the downside with real estate is, unlike stocks and bonds where they're liquid, real estate is, you know, if you've got to bail out of a property, you're gonna have to do a fire sale, and then you're gonna really take it on the chin. So again, I would rent, and if you've got a 5-6 year outlook where you could probably stay in that community, then it might make a little bit more sense to buy. What percent of your income should you save for near, midterm, and retirement? We spoke about a minimum of 10% annually. The more, the merrier. When do we go straight to someone like me, and when to go to a coach? I think that's a good answer. Coach for budgeting, me, financial advisor, where to put your investments. Yosef, thanks for that answer. I think that's pretty good. Buying a house versus renting. That's a loaded question. I can answer more in Israel, right? I can give you both sides of things here. I don't know the real estate market so well in the US. I'm not really qualified to answer. In Israel, it's very much, it's economics versus sort of emotional or psychological. On the other side, economically, it probably pays to rent. It's very much a renter's market here, meaning that what an apartment owner gets, let's say he puts 2 million shekels into an apartment and he's getting 4,000 shekels of rent. That means he's getting a return which is under 2.5% annually, which is nothing to write home about. In Israel, real estate is all about capital appreciation. It's not really about the rent money, which means that it's a good deal for the renter. On the other hand, in Israel, there's no real long-term rental market, which means if you want to lock in a 10 or 20-year rent like you could do in America, in Israel, forget it. Your landlord's going to call you one day after a year and say, you know what, Mike, I've got a grandson in Los Angeles who just got married and he's moving back, and I need your apartment in 90 days. That's just the way it works. So that's like, that's one of the minuses of renting. And the other minus of renting is at some point, you might want to lay down your own roots and have your own kitchen and have your own place, if you're able to economically. So money-wise, it probably makes sense to rent, but there are all these other issues which probably skew it, if you're able to pull it off, to buy an apartment in Israel. And as I said, in the US, I'm not really qualified to answer that. What makes more sense to invest in stocks or bonds? That's a function of your goals, your needs, your risk profile, how much other money you have. That's, if you have, if you can afford to lose money, then you can invest in stocks. That's something I think I probably neglected to speak about earlier. Eliyahu, when it comes time to investing in stocks, you have to be prepared to be able to lose money, right? The stock market goes down, and it can go down severely. And if the money that you have, you're not able to lose, then don't invest in stocks. That's like a rule that I think I neglected earlier on, but I think it's really important to speak about. Should a young family be nervous about losing their government benefits with a small investment? That's a question I'm not qualified to answer that. That's a question for an accountant that's got like US specific things to it. I don't know the answer, I'm sorry. Speak to an accountant, or your coach, your Mesila coach might know the answer to that. If your money is in a retirement account in cash, which is intended to be long-term, is now a good time to get back in the market? How would you get back in? I would say that it's always a good time to invest. I'm not a big fan of trying to time things. In fact, we just went through a cycle where people who tried to time it not only lost 20 or 30% of their money on the downswing when the market dropped, and then they decided to sell. They were too nervous to get back in, and the market ran all the way back up. So they lost on both ends, right? So I'm a believer of staying invested for the most part. I don't believe in trying to time things. How do you get back in? You know, if you have a retirement account, that means you already have a brokerage account. So you'd want to invest. You speak to your advisor. You can contact me. I'd be happy to help you if possible. Or speak to your advisor, and they'll know how to, you know, how you should invest the money. What else do we have? If a client or friend asks what's a 3-minute speech, I can tell him if he doesn't even know what compound interest is. I don't exactly understand that, but compound interest is basically like this. By doing nothing, by investing money and doing nothing, you have more money than you would have had previously. I'll give you a quick example. I'll make it really simple. Let's say you start out with $100 and you get 2% interest every year, and you don't do anything. So with compound interest, after the first year, you have $102. If your interest is not compounding at 2%, after year number 2, you'd have $104. But through the magic of compound interest, you actually end up with like $104 and whatever cents. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but after a few years of that compounding, all of a sudden, it jumps up. It jumps up all the way to the fact that there's what's called the rule of 72, which means when you compound interest and you get to 72%, you actually double your money. What's that mean? That means let's say after 7 years, if I make 10%, a little more than 10% a year, when I compound at 10%, I'm actually going to double my money, right? When you would say,
After
well, but
7
10
years.
times 7 is only 70%, right? That's the magic of compound interest. You can just do it on a piece of paper and calculate with a calculator, but it really works.
Right. So basically, in terms of compound interest, what you want to do is take the average amount, just to give you just a little, let's say you have the number 72, right? So let's say you're earning 9% or 9% a year. So in how many years will I double my money? Well, divide 72 by 9, and that's 8 years.
As
now,
long
by
as it's
the way,
compounding. If it's not compounding, you know, it's going to take you 8% is going to take you 12 and a half years. But if it compounds, you do it in 9 years.
I want to tell you, thank you. Well, I want to tell you something that'll make you cry a little bit. You ready to cry a little bit? So when we talk about credit card debt, I explain this to my clients as well. And they say, well, what percentage, how much credit card debt do you have? They say, I have $10,000 in credit card debt. I say, what's your APR? They say, first of all, I don't know. Okay, great. And they say, oh, I am an accountant. I'm like, great. And no, I'm not making fun of my clients, right? I'm just saying what's happening. So they say, oh, I don't, okay. So they say, well, what, my APR is 24%. I say, great. So you're paying 24% on your credit card. I say, what's 72 divided by 24? They say 3. I said, so in 3 years, you're not gonna owe $10,000 to the credit card company. You're gonna owe $20,000 to the company.
Right.
In 3 years at 24%.
Works the other way, exactly.
Works the other way, and that's a really good investment. So I just want to tell you, I have a lot of folks out there who say, oh, I have some debt and I have some investments. I fish you out a little bit, Aaron. You're a good guy. I'll tell you what I say. People have, and I say to them, let's do the numbers. You have $10,000 in debt to the credit card company. In 3 years, it's going to be $20,000. You know that. Yeah, we know. We did the numbers with you. We believe you. Yeah, rule of 72. I said, and what's it going to be in 3 years if you invest in your compound interest, your side money over there, your $10,000 on the side? What's it going to be? 10,000. Well, it's going to be 8%. It's going to be like $15,000. I say, there you have your answer right there, right? Do the math, buddy. Do the math. You can learn a lot, as you said. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You learn a lot by doing the math. Do the numbers, crunch the numbers, get a little education. What will this be in the long term? People say to me, oh, you've made the answer for me. I said, exactly. The math made the answer. You made the answer for yourself. You taught yourself a lesson, and that's a good lesson. Okay, any other questions you want to
you just almost answered the next question. We're planning on buying a car. Do you recommend we pay in full or invest the money we would have used to pay for it and finance instead? I think if you're in a Mesila program, you should know the answer to that.
No way, buddy.
Have the best of both worlds and buy a used car and take some of the extra money and invest it. But certainly don't go into debt. Paying cash, and do it as cheap as you can. Definitely don't take on debt. We don't like debt. Is it better to buy a smaller portfolio of real estate on your own or join other people on a larger portfolio, but then be unable to make your own decisions? It's an interesting question. You know, you can diversify more when you join other people. The downside with joining other people is that you can sometimes fall prey to one of these aforementioned scams. You really have to know when you're getting into a private real estate deal, you got to know the people involved and really, really sort of kick the tires on them and know that they're trustworthy. I would sort of start small. I think my gut tells me to start small. Everything's in your name. You know, as you save money, you buy in cash. Don't get over leveraged. Please don't get over leveraged, and do it that way. I think it's a little bit safer than joining other people who you might not know about, and you know it's not in your name, and bad things can happen.
What about the answer? Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
That's true, but in real estate, if you're trying to build a real estate portfolio, so you start small, you buy an apartment here or a house here, you buy another property. When you get enough money, you do another one. Like, don't take on too much leverage, right? We don't like debt, but you know, you'll end up diversifying over time, as opposed to, you know, if it's a publicly traded company and you want to diversify that way, go for it. I don't have a problem, because that's regulated and there's all, you know, you have protections built in. But you know, if you know the people really, really well and you can trust them, and they, you know, and they've got good reputations and they return their money, then that's a different story. But if somebody tells you that he's got a cousin who's just starting out in real estate, join the deal, I'd run the other direction. I would stay away from it. Are you for or against hedging volatility? I think for most people, that's going to be a little bit too sophisticated. So I would say that just roll with the volatility, right? Investing is like a roller coaster, but just roll with it, because if you can't handle the volatility, you shouldn't be investing in the stock market to begin with. So that's one of the, you know, it comes with the territory. Is whole life insurance like Guardian a good investment because it's guaranteed? I'm not qualified. I'm not licensed in insurance. You've got to. That's not my thing. I'm just not able to. I'm not able to legally answer that. I'm sorry. Where am I located? I'm actually located in the holy city of Jerusalem. We live in Israel, renting. We have a nice income to afford a monthly mortgage. We struggle figuring out how to get 30% down payment. Do we borrow? What do we do every year? Renting. We miss out on a real estate investment. Well, I would tell you that you know, renting gets sort of a bad name. Everybody says, well, when you rent, you're sort of flushing your money down the toilet. It's not exactly true, because when you rent, you're getting a roof over your head, and you're getting utilities, and you're getting water, and you're getting, you know, you're getting protected from the elements. You're not living in the street. So it's not so terrible, renting. You know, it might take you a little bit longer to, you know, to scrounge around and be able to save for that down payment. You know, Israel, what you might want to do is look for a different community in Israel. There are cheaper communities in Israel. You don't have to live, you know, you don't have to live in Yerushalayim. You don't have to live in the Tel Aviv area. There are places which are cheaper, and you know, if you want to buy, you can buy to them. I tell people to do that. Oftentimes they laugh at me, but there are people who listen to my advice and, you know, have moved up to the very north of the country and live in Nahariya and buy an apartment there for, you know, what's the equivalent of $150,000, $160,000. You know, and you can, there are people who live in these places, right? And if that's what you want to do, sometimes we have to sacrifice. We can't always, you know, live exactly where we want to live. So, or rent.
That's it. We can't have it all.
You can't have it all, right? Sometimes we can't have it all. Should I focus on paying off my mortgage, or should I invest the money instead? That's an excellent question. I like that question. I like to sort of do both tracks, where you accelerate paying off your mortgage, but at the same time, you also invest. So sort of you're killing two birds with one stone, because at the end of the day, you're going to end up with a lot more wealth if you sort of save on two tracks. Like, you know, paying off your mortgage is a form of saving. So if you save on two tracks, I think at the end of the day, you're going to end up with a lot more money than if you just focus on one of them. So, you know, if you have $10,000 a year extra, So throw an extra 5,000 at your mortgage and throw 5,000 into the market and invest. I think that's the best
Aaron,
way to do it. Sort of again, the
I'm
middle.
gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go right now, unfortunately. You're welcome to stay on and answer more questions, but I appreciate your time, and I hope that it was a fruitful conversation, and maybe have another one day. Okay? Chag kosher v'sameach, ksiva chesima tova.
Ksiva chesima tova. Ksiva chesima tova.
Okay, all the best.
Bye-bye. I guess I'll keep answering the questions as they come in for a few more minutes. It's getting late by me, but I'll keep doing it. Should we as coaches be recommending people to put money in a mutual fund that tracks S&P 500, even if they aren't 100% sure of it? I'm not sure exactly what that means, but if they want to invest and they, it meets their goals and it meets their needs, and they're able to, they have the time horizon. I think to start off with, I would want more of a diversified type of portfolio, but I think putting money in the S&P 500 is fine. Anything else? People say owning a property in Israel is gold. Why is that? Because over time, properties has moved up, just like it's moved up in a lot of places. I don't believe that it's gold. I believe that property is one of the very good ways to invest, just like stocks and bonds is a very good way to invest. So I don't get always carried away what other people say, but it's good. It's a good way as any to invest. Yeah, Roth IRAs are great ways to invest. Anybody thank you, Russell. Anybody who has direct questions, feel free to email me. I put my email out there before. What else? A mutual fund. A mutual fund is a basket, which is generally managed by somebody, by a firm, a team, according to a certain mandate. It can be more aggressive, more conservative, stocks or bonds. And they sort of do the investing for you in certain respects. They do all the buying and selling for you. They tend to be slightly more expensive. Nowadays, people are more, it's more trendy. It's more thought to be more wise to invest in exchange traded funds, which are called ETFs. But mutual fund, any kind of investing, like I say, is good. There are better ways to invest probably, but mutual funds are okay. Is there a fund you recommend for 15-year horizon? I can't recommend anything. I'm not allowed to regulatory wise. I would have to know. You can reach out to me by email. We can discuss maybe your long-term goals and your needs and your financial profile. And with that, I'd be able to, speak more directly into what it is that you might want to invest. How do you start investing in stocks? You can speak to an advisor. I'd be happy to help you if you need any questions. Even if it's not with me, I'd be happy to sort of help you and show you the ropes, teach you so that you can be sort of an intelligent investor and sort of, do things the way that they should be. Why should you pay off a mortgage when you earn more percent with the stock market? Well, do you? I don't know. Do you? Over time you do, but over the short term you don't, right? The market did drop 35%. So I think the point being, we don't know. It's historical numbers and we don't know. And just like I said before, the Gemara says you should invest by diversifying, right? Shlish, shlish, shlish. I think the same thing goes here. When you're pay off your mortgage, get out of debt, right? Debt is not a good thing. And save on both tracks. Pay off your mortgage, but save at the same time. I'm renting using my down payment to buy rental property instead. I believe that will allow me to get real estate investing in the portfolio. I won't be able to jump into real estate investing. I'll come out ahead in the long run by putting my money into rental properties. Does that make any sense? I think I'd be happy to speak to you privately. For that, you can reach out to me by email. That's aaron@lighthousecapital.co.il, and we can talk in more depth about it. That's a loaded question. I think there's a lot more information needed in order to really answer that. I think we're done. Do you have any knowledge on cross taxation? If you're talking about being in Israel and the U.S., I'm not an accountant, but I can certainly point you to people who, to accountants that we work with, and we work with most of them, who do both Israel and the U.S. Feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to give you a few names. If anybody else has any questions, now's the time. Otherwise, I think that's going to be it. I wish you all a ksiva v'chasima tova. Thanks for joining. I hope it was helpful. I hope this was good. Again, anybody's got any questions, feel free to email me. That's at Aaron, A-A-R-O-N, at Lighthouse. I'm writing it down right now, actually. lighthousecapital.co.il. Whoops. And I don't know what just happened there. I'm not sure why that's not going, but I guess we are done. So thank you very much. Ksiva Chasima Tova to everybody else. You know what? Hold on 1 second. I'll put that back. Hold on. Oh, hold on. I got it. Send everybody. Aaron Lighthouse. There we go. And okay, feel free to email me once again. I think that's it. That's a wrap. Have a ksiva chasima tova. Thanks for joining. I hope it was good. I hope it wasn't a waste of anybody's time. I hope you got some good information from it. And that's it. Kol Tuv. All the best.